We are going to get started. Thank you very much. My name is Jay Weiner. I'm with the firm Rosette LLP. I serve as the water counsel to the Fort Yuma Quechan Indian tribe. I don't actually control the mic. They just put it on me. All right, I can bellow too, but all right. Jay Weiner, Rosette LLP, water counsel to the Fort Yuma Quechan Indian tribe, and incredibly honored to have been asked to moderate this panel. We have heard a lot about tribes the last day and a half, and it is now time to hear directly from tribal leaders for themselves. We've got some very impressive elected leadership here. I also do want to take a moment to recognize that we have other tribal leaders in the room. I know that we have President Coteen and Councilman Zion White from Quechan. I know we have Chairman Levis from Chemehuevi. And I know that there are other leaders here who I can't immediately name check, so I apologize for that, but I think that everyone should take the opportunity to seek out the tribal leaders that they can. We have that's right, we have Vice Chair, I apologize, Loma Yeswa, thank you. We have Vice Chair Loma Yeswa from CRIT. And I just really want to acknowledge that. Yeah, did President first. Trust me, Daryl, I will take care of my client, I promise. Excellent. I actually would be great if you want to stand up and just so people can acknowledge you. That would be terrific, Chairman. Hopi Chairman. And I just really want to extend my gratitude to my panelists as well as the other tribal leaders in the room. As you may have heard me say elsewhere, tribes have the same governing responsibilities as states, oftentimes with the resources of small rural counties. And so the fact that we have this collection of elected tribal leaders who have taken the time to come here to participate in this conference is a demonstration of the commitment that tribes across the basin are making to the seriousness of these issues and the importance of the discussion having here. And so I am, with no further ado, I'm really excited to hand over to my panel because you do not need to hear more from me. We need to hear from elected tribal leadership. Thank you.
All right. They saved the best for last. That's what I say with the tribal leaders on this day. Kuchkamadoo.
Kuchkamadoo.
Hemidao, Inyepimul, Amelia Flores, Makapchadom. Greetings to you all. And it looks like we got a happy crowd here. Iwan Tahotka, all your hearts are good here today? Yeah? Good. So I just want to set the stage for that. But as chairwoman of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, otherwise known as CRIT. Today, it's a good day to be a critter. But it's my honor to be here in beautiful Colorado to speak with you on behalf of my people. In the spirit of water, I stand here today with great and deepest respects for the many tribal nations who called these lands home since time began. As we discuss the many issues before us regarding our great river, may we always be mindful of our ancestors, those who came before us, so that today's tribal leaders like myself and our panelists, Governor Lewis, Chairman White Skunk, and Attorney Jay Weiner, and all the tribal leaders in this room and those watching online have the opportunity to stand tall and have our voices heard. May their spirits continue to push us onward, as well as grant us all a safe journey home after this conference is over. I would like to thank the organizers at the Getch's Wilkinson Center and the Water and Tribes Initiative for asking me to provide my thoughts regarding the state of our Colorado River Basin. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Native American Rights Fund, John Echohawk. and the Indigenous Women Leaders Network, all the young girls. I also want to acknowledge the members of my tribal council that are here with me today. Vice Chairman Lomieswa, Vanessa Welch, who has with her the next generation of our leaders for our tribal nation. While I believe there is great uncertainty as we move into this next period on the Colorado River, I also believe the solutions are in front of us. These solutions, quite frankly, start with full partnership and engagement of the 30 Colorado River tribal nations of this basin. We understand the river, and we understand its limits. We also understand the lessons of history all too well, where time and time again, tribal nations bear the brunt of shortages and, did it stop?
They're not advancing.
Oh, and the inability to use our water. Removing barriers, fully embracing senior tribal water rights, looking for creative ways to allow senior tribal water to support the needs of the basin, while also recognizing the economic, spiritual, and cultural needs of tribal nations. All are solutions that are real and meaningful. Our greatest weapon against uncertainty is inclusion. We need to have one common ground, and that common ground is to save our river. But first, for those who are not familiar with CRIT, let me take a moment and talk about my homeland. I also want to invite you all to come to our homelands and visit us, but not now, wait till it's cooler. We are called the Colorado River Indian Tribes after the river. The river defines us. We don't define the river. And because our enrolled members, all 4,650 enrolled members, are descendant from 4 distinct tribal nations, Mojave, Chemehuevi, Hopi, and Navajo. All 4 have their own stories and traditions, which have been passed down from one generation to the next. My Mojave ancestors lived along the Colorado River since time began. Our creator, Mataville, and his son, Mastamho, provided the Colorado River for the Mojave and other indigenous people who live along its banks. My ancestors understood how to live with the river, learning to tell the change in seasons by the rise and fall of its water, knowing intuitively when it was time to plant and farm and when it was time to gather fish and hunt. In those lean years, they also traveled inland to hunt and gather. But in providing the Colorado River, Mataville also entrusted us with the sacred responsibility to care and sustain the river that gives life, not just to humans, but all the birds, the plants, and animals that depend on it. This responsibility is reflected in each generation, passing on the obligation to protect the river for the next generation. In an unbroken chain that reaches back to the beginning of time and will reach forward until time itself stops. And over time, members of the other tribal nations that are now part of CRIT joined us. They brought with them their traditions, which increased and built upon our collective knowledge and understanding of our waters and our lands. At CRIT, we are proud of our diversity as it makes us stronger and gives us a rich culture and heritage that is integrated into our daily existence. It is through our strength of diversity and knowledge developed over time that we are proud to be both farmers of our lands and stewards of our waters and its ecosystem. The river is more than an economic driver for our members. It is at the center of our very existence. In our creation story, and there's many versions of our creation story, and it takes months to tell the creation story. But in the creation story, Mativil designated the birds to create how the river flowed. Yellock, Roadrunner, they were the ones that created the nooks and the crannies and the bends and the straightness of this river. And after they completed their tasks, then they became who they are today. Roadrunner does not swim anymore. He travels fast on, Talpo travels fast on the land. Wanted to share that part with you of who we are and what we believe this river is to us. Our reservation covers over 400 square miles of fertile river bottom and floodplains, desert mountain ranges, and beautiful mesas in both Arizona and in California. Embedded in our lands are name places, petroglyphs, trails, and intaglios. In 1865, our reservation was established by an act of Congress by President Abraham Lincoln. And I was gonna look on March 3rd, and I was gonna look up, I think he was assassinated, in April 15, 16? So it was probably one of the last documents that he signed. It is in this action by Congress in 1865 that makes CRIT the senior-most tribal water right in the lower basin of the Colorado River. I wanted you to have this understanding about CRIT and our values before turning to the theme of this conference, searching for solutions in the face of uncertainty. I believe there can be no real or doable solutions without the full and active engagement of tribal nations who account for over 25% of the adjudicated water in this basin. CRIT alone represents 23% of Arizona's Colorado River entitlement and almost 10% of the entire lower basin entitlement. Yet I stand here today with an all too familiar refrain that tribal nations continue to be marginalized in these discussions. Yes, things are better than they used to be. But having said that, I want to acknowledge the reclamation staff in the room for their efforts But we still have a long ways to go before tribal nations are treated as true partners in this process. Tribal leaders, do you agree with me? Since DCP, tribal nations have said they wanted to be at the table, but I say we need to have a seat in the boat, equipped with an oar in our hands, helping to navigate and shape those solutions. At CRIT, we have started to take actions that strengthen our sovereignty and protect our interest. We have seen our river stretched and pulled far beyond what anyone could have imagined 100 years ago when the compact was signed. A compact without tribal involvement and engagement, without any real discussion of the needs of the river itself. I'm going to pause here because as former librarian archivist, I listened to my elders and what they shared with me. And it also reminds me of a story I heard about Fish and Game. There was a need in the northern part of the United States for a guardrail. We all know what guardrails are, right? They're for the cattle. Anyway, the decision makers back in DC got the memo, a guardrail was needed. So they thought security. So what did they do? They sent a person to be the guardrail and not the actual guardrails. So we have to know the needs that are out there and not sit in our offices and make those decisions. That's what we tried to do when I worked in our library archives in doing activities for our tribal members. We went out in the community, we got their input, we did surveys, and there we planned those activities that were successful, that met the needs of our people. And that's what we must do today to save our river. It has been the lack of accountability to the very resource that is the very essence of who we are as a people that our tribal council took action to acknowledge the personhood. Now, I know John talked about it yesterday, so I'm just going to touch lightly on it. The personhood of our river, and to require that all of our future transactions regarding the Colorado River must be grounded in protection of the resource for future generations. For Kalila, she's sleeping right now, and her mama's probably saying, thank God she's sleeping. But it's for her. A living Colorado River with a functioning ecosystem is as important to our existence as the air we breathe. In addition, our tribal council has approved principles that will govern our engagement in Colorado River matters. Principles that reflect our obligation to be stewards of the resource and prioritizing assistance to other tribal nations. We have enacted a water code to provide the tools to monitor and evaluate water use throughout our reservation lands and are engaged in a study to evaluate how to bring the oldest Indian irrigation project in the United States up to the 21st century and the standards that come along with it. But while we are proud of the actions we are taking, there are no limits to what we can accomplish without the help of our trustees and state partners who continue to make decisions affecting us without our input. On any given day, our tribal council must grapple with the very real impacts to our members, our community, our resources, our culture, and our religion from decisions being made in faraway places with little to no understanding of how these decisions and policies will affect us. We must make decisions on how to optimize our water because we cannot fully access, much less utilize all of our water resources due to the lack of funds to maintain the irrigation project. We must allocate our limited resources on experts and attorneys to push back on decisions that threaten our future, like including pro rata in NEPA documents. Make no mistakes, the failure to fully engage tribal nations in this process, leaving us to react to the decisions made by others, is a threat to our inherent sovereignty and to our very existence. We must also strive to remove barriers to full tribal involvement. For example, at CRIT, all of our water use is through the Colorado River Indian Irrigation Project, run by BIA. Yet it is chronically underfunded by the BIA. As a result, we only consume approximately half of our entitlement recognized by the Supreme Court in Arizona versus California. And the water we are entitled to use flows to others in the priority system, free of charge, while our lands, our economy, and our people suffer. Currently, there are approximately 30% of our lands that are not in production because we are unable to move that water onto our fields because of BIA. Yet, despite only using half of our water to participate in the solution and help our neighbors in the basin, we will be asked to give up more because under our leasing authorization from Congress, we must prove to Reclamation in Arizona that we have reduced our consumptive use of water supplies to be compensated for our water. This means that in addition to only using half of our water, we must ask our farmers to make additional sacrifices before there is any economic payment made to our tribe. A simple change of the rules and investment in our infrastructure could bring significant change and changes for not only just CRIT, but for the entire basin. I firmly believe the solutions are in front of us. And I know the other tribal leaders in this room are in agreement. Correct? Collaborative, adaptive management calls us to act not alone, but together. By combining our knowledge, our strengths, and courage, we can do this. Like in yesterday's presentation, Mom, you can do this. Well, we can do this too. We turn to challenges and opportunities for future generations. There is also one other certainty I leave you with. I'm about finished, bear with me. At CRIT, we will fight for those things that are dear to us. Iwanch, Ahotka. And that reflect our values as people who have lived along the river since time immemorial. Yomom, Etka. Korenyem, Nyanyontia. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome to our state, to our lands, our homelands of the Ute Mountain Utes, as well as the Ute people from the 3 different directions of the Northern Ute and the Southern Utes. We welcome you to the state of Colorado, our Aboriginal lands that the Utes had once lived in, Rome, that call this great state our home. In this opportunity that is given to me to speak before the participants to this water conference and to the people that acknowledge how important water is to the indigenous people for years, for centuries, for decades. The tribes that utilize whatever water streams, reservoirs throughout this great turtle country. We come here with good faith and good thoughts. My name is Selwyn Whiteskunk. I am the tribal chairman of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. I've been in this position for 22 years, serving the great Ute nation. I've been elected tribal chairman in the early 2004, 2007. I've been a council member since 1997. And in those times, we have long made strides to improve the quality of life of the Ute Mountain Ute people and its surrounding brothers and sisters that utilize the rivers that flow through our states and through the reservations of our country. Places that we weren't accustomed to, but were put into those places thinking that that was a way of getting rid of us in this particular time. Our homes, as we go into the Rocky Mountains, are just in the Rocky Mountains, to where we were, as a nomadic tribe, utilized every aspect of the land, of the wildlife, of the forest, to meet the need of the Ute people, to address and come forth and be strong. Every time we come into our sacred homelands that range from I-70 south to the New Mexico state line and beyond into the Taos country, Pueblo country, west towards Arizona, to the northwest into the state of Utah. Those were our Aboriginal lands. Those were the rivers that guided us into where our boundaries were as people of this land. So today, as we embark, as every tribe embarks, the critical component of life, the critical component of the existence of our indigenous people are always threatened at every level. The way of life, who we are as people. There are laws that are put in place. There are treaties that are put in place that are broken, that deal with life, the sustainability of life. Important to us is water. You know, when I came on board in 1997 as an early young college-educated individual, served in the military for 6 years, getting a degree, coming back, running our programs on the reservation, having this outlook of getting things done, and then putting in to an elected official position within the tribal government. The first assignment I had was to negotiate our water rights, to negotiate one of the water projects in southwest Colorado. The water project that was completed was the Dolores McPhee Reservoir Water Project was completed. Then came the Animas La Plata Project. As a new elected official, and through the grassroots organization of our communities and our brothers and sisters of the Southern Ute and Northern Ute, the grassroots organization were very adamant of not supporting the Animas La Plata Project. There was many reasons, and there was many reasons at the tribal level to oppose this project. But as a newly elected official and the tribal chairman assigning me to this Animas La Plata project, I had to take into account and I had to put my personal feelings aside to ensure that what I was doing and how I was advocating for the Ute people in a very hard decision to make, because we knew in our hearts that if we were to stop the water for whatever development, for not us, the Ute people, but for others. Our thoughts, and growing up with the leadership as a young man, my grandfather and grandmother used to feed and cook for the last traditional chief in our home. And I would hear his stories. I would hear what he was going through. The late Chief Jack House had an interpreter, had his counsel at every afternoon at my grandmother's house. And they would put me aside as a young man. They would tell me, Mava kere, yanak, tatoaju, bagavani, busa maibit, nakabit, nanaga, mugya, mava karubani. What they said was, go sit over there. Listen, when you become a man, you're going to be where they're at. You're going to make these decisions that you're going to learn from this man. This man was an honorable man. He was the last chief of our tribe, our Ute tribe. I would sit there, I would listen. He would talk about everything from the water, particularly the waters, the river. What was Congress imposing? What was the government ready to do with our waters that ran through our homeland? And he told me, never give up in fighting for your people's right. The livability of your people is the water. If there's no water, there's no people. It's like our wild horses, our feral horses. We take our wild horses off the reservation, corral them and ship them off wherever. So our lives perish. So with that, as I grew up, I always reminded myself the importance that I had with my people. I always reflect back to those teachings. They were the predictors of what was about to happen, what was going to take place in our lives, our people's lives, because they've had that ability to understand what was going on, the teachings that they were teaching. So when I started to negotiate the Animas La Plata project, it was ongoing since the 1950s. We really got into it in the 1988 in the Colorado Ute Water Settlement. That was before I was in office, and yet I heard a little about it. And then as to imply and work with the other individuals and the water conservancy districts and the other tribes that were alongside us in many different ways that are still there at our side on the upper Colorado River. We came to understand, and one of the biggest things that we utilized or we had to understand, or I, as a leader in Washington, D.C., spending 2-3 weeks advocating, lobbying, and trying to get this project funded, try to make agreements, try to settle some of the issues that were always continuously at the forefront of why do you want this river? Why do you want this project to be funded? You know, and we had our reasons. We had our reasons to do that. But, you know, as I read and I understood, then we went to the Winters Doctrine. The Winters Doctrine was established in 1908, and it was a Supreme Court ruling that the court held that when the federal government established reservation, it implicitly reserved water from then the Milk River sufficient to irrigate the land and support tribes. Back then, it was the Fort Belknap tribe of Montana. Regardless of the subsequent state water laws or settlers' claim, this principle recognized that the water is essential for the survival and self-sufficiency of tribal communities. The Winters Doctrine established that when the federal government creates an Indian reservation, it implicitly reserves sufficient water to fulfill the reservation's purposes, giving tribes senior water rights that cannot be lost through non-use. The key principles to the Winters Doctrine was the priority dates. Tribal water rights under the Winters Doctrine are considered established as of the date the reservation was created, making them senior to most other water users in western United States. The non-forfeitable, unlike state-based water rights under prior appropriation systems, these rights cannot be lost due to non-use. The future needs. The rights account for both present and future needs of the reservation, including agricultural, cultural, domestic, and cultural uses. The quantification, courts often quantify these rights based on the water necessary to irrigate and practically irrigate acreages of the reservation. But the water may also be used for non-agricultural purposes. The fourth, the fifth, the federal supremacy. These rights are federal in nature and exist independently of state water law. The state courts are often used to adjudicate and quantify them under the McCarran Amendments. The Winter Doctrine has a broad implication for water allocation in the western United States where water is scarce. Tribal reserved rights often predate other claims, which can affect junior water right users and lead to complex negotiation or litigation to determine the exact quantity and source of water. Additionally, these rights include implied rights to fetch and access resource within the water, reinforcing the tribe's ability to maintain their traditional way of land. Today, the Winters Doctrine underpins tribal water rights across the country: Colorado, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Montana, Wyoming, and other western states. It ensures that reservations have sufficient water to sustain community agricultural and cultural practices, and it continues to influence federal and state water policy. The Winters Doctrine is a foundation of legal principle that secures senior non-forfeitable water rights for tribes the federal government's obligation to provide for the purpose of the Indian tribal lands that are called reservations. Today, those rights and utilization of the Winters Doctrine at times are impeded by federal policies, regulations from all facets of government. They undermine the tribe's ability to utilize the water that we're entitled. 2 years ago, I took a trip with the water organization. We started from the headwaters of the Colorado River, and it took us to the town of Grand Junction, Colorado. Along the route, on a chartered bus, being an indigenous person on this charter, and stopping at every diversion, not knowing that the Front Range has an unequivocally power to divert the Colorado River through tunnels, through canals, into the city of Denver, into the metropolitan areas on the Front Range. The power that the city of Denver, the Front Range, has to divert what is most precious to us as well. I'm not saying it's not utilized in a way that is good for the community of the Front Range, but as well the tribes. It really impacts not only the Ute people, the tribes of the upper Colorado River Basin, but also as well as the lower Colorado Basin tribes. It puts us at odds with each other. It is a systematic way, as I see it. It prevents the tribes of trying to work issues out, as Chairperson said. We have to stick together. We have to have a commonality of the uses and have that understanding, the uses that each tribe needs and each tribe has. We understand the economic developments, and we understand the economies of the 4 states, the 5, 6, 7 states that are at question at utilizing these waters. But the fact of the matter is that there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's got to be a lot of compromise, and not for the tribes, but for the non-Indian users as well. We are people that need to sustain our lives, and the life that we are to sustain is utilizing the water for our people. Our people are in dire need of the water. Our agricultural farm on the Ute Mountain Ute tribe used to be 100% irrigatable. Today, we only have a 30% of deliverable water onto our reservation. We only have 3 center pivots or 3 fields that only produce hay, which at times we could produce 7,000 to 10,000 acres of produce, hay, and other needs for our people. We have to buy water from our private landowners to the north in Montezuma County to have sustainable water to operate our farms that the government had built, the Beale Reclamation. They're continuously coming to the reservation, looking at ways to improve and look at other methods to sustain the farm. Again, it is a federal subsidy program that was initiated by the Bureau of Reclamation. And the Bureau of Reclamation is doing their best to work with us. And it really is detrimental the current president with an executive order to do away with what the tribes, the 7 tribes that really worked diligently in a process that we could all agree about with his executive order can diminish and take away what we worked, and that is hurtful to the tribes. We have to start back from square one, and that was a long process that took our consultants took the reclamation, took the states, took everybody's efforts to just about nothing. And we have to start over again as to how we're going to best utilize the river and its usefulness. The Ute Mountain Ute tribe cannot sell, lease its water of the Animas La Plata project. It's very detrimental to us. It hurts us in a way economically. We're in an isolated place, as every tribe in the Southwest is. We have to make means work. We have to work the way it's best going to utilize. So I stand before this conference and the tribal leaders with my respects. I ask that we come together at some point, at some place and time. It's disturbing amongst tribes to figure out what is the best methodology to utilize the Colorado River in both upper and lower basins. Next week, we're having the 10 tribes meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're going to discuss the issues of what the issues that we should really work on in addressing legislative, tribal, and more importantly, the Colorado River that sustains our lives. Each and every one of you tribal entities, organizations, tribal leaders have an important role to fulfill, and that fulfillment is to honor our people and to honor our ancestors that utilized this water and called it life for years to come, generations to come. So I leave you with that thought of togetherness, understanding what was given to us and what we can do for tomorrow for our people is the most important thing that is there for us. It far exceeds anything that we can imagine. This water is our livelihood. We depend on it. Our children are going to depend on it, our grandchildren. So it is what I have to say today in regards of the water that plague our tribal nations, not only the Ute people. For 22 years, you get to this point in leadership that you understand. You don't understand it in 1 or 2 terms. It takes a long time to understand, to advocate from the heart, to say what you got to say as a tribal leader to people who don't understand or people who want to understand. You understand. You have that knowledge. You have that in your heart as a leader. So I thank you. Tawayak, you guys are phenomenal people. You are decision makers. I hope that you understand what our tribal leaders are faced with, the issues, the decisions, and their decisions are based on the livelihood of their people. And all of our decisions are likewise as well. The conservancy districts, the water districts, the city councils, county commissioners, we're faced with some decisions that at times are not the best decisions, but they're decisions that we see that's going to help our community to the best of its ability. The Colorado River is an important river. It's the livelihood of all people in the western states. So I thank you, and I wish you the best for the summer And if we have to conserve water, that is what we have to do, but at least release a gallon of water for each tribe down the river so we could have additional water. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming to this panel. I guess that's all that needs to be said, right? Amazing, amazing testimony from Chairwoman and Chairman, who I have the deepest respect for. Skuksiadik, Anya Anapchuka, Governor Stephen Roe Lewis, Amjad, Guaki, Sakaton. Shabay Masma, how is everyone doing? I know everyone's doing well, getting a lot out of this conference. Chairman, I just want to thank and recognize and be respectful for allowing us on your traditional lands and your other Ute relatives, tribal nations as well. Thank you. We very appreciate the opportunity to come every time I have the opportunity to come to the beautiful state of Colorado. I also want to recognize a couple of people as well. I want to recognize, of course, a good friend of mine, and I know an amazing leader in his own right, State Senator from New Mexico, Benny Shendo, from the Jemez Pueblo. Benny, Senator. And of course, John Echo Hawk, who is a living legend here. I had to take my obligatory photo with him earlier and sent that to my mother, and so my mother, Willardine, says hi, and she's glad that you're getting around better, and so she, of course, Willardine says hi. My late father, Rod Lewis, who was the first attorney for the Gila River Indian community, my tribe, and who came to Getch's and who knew the late Professor Getch's as well, very well. He was the first Native American to argue a case successfully before the U.S. Supreme Court. This was in and to prevail, exactly. 1982, Central Machinery versus Arizona Tax Commission. A young attorney who had just started working for the Gila River Indian community. No resources at all. I remember, at the kitchen table, he had all of his files and his books. He was getting ready to argue this case about state infringement on tax authority on the Gila River Indian community. Before we had casinos, before we had much, we had our Gila River farms, which is a tie to our Aboriginal heritage, our traditional heritage of the Hoogam civilization, our ancestors, where all of modern day Phoenix is built upon that sacred fingerprint of canal systems that were conservatively carbon dated over 2,000 years old. We have lived there, as all of the 30 tribes in the basin have lived in our respective areas since time immemorial. And to be witness to that, and going back to John Elkohawk, he was one of the few resources that provided my father, when he argued the Central Machinery case, before the U.S. Supreme Court. So, John, thank you so much. We love you. Indian country is so blessed that you're still here. So, providing the ongoing leadership of the Native American Rights Fund. Thank you, John. I also want to recognize our team, Jason Howder, who's a community member as well with our water team, Don Pongres, who actually was a confidant, was a colleague, and a dear friend of my father, and they were arm in arm in regards to fighting for, negotiating the Arizona Water Settlement Act, the largest water settlement act of the time in 2004. Of course, Don and Jason are a part of our water team now. Most of you know them. Also Mr. Dave DeJong in the back, who is the director of our Pima Maricopa Irrigation Project as well. Probably one of the most successful capital projects funded by our federal government and was put into effect by our water settlement as well. Dave, and I know that he did a presentation earlier, and he gets things done. He is an academic, he's a teacher. He went to Arizona, he went to that school down south at the University of Arizona. That other school down there, yeah, okay. That's nice. Yeah, go Devils. Anyway, but Dave did. Yeah, I know. But Dave did he gets stuff done. You know, he had completed our solar panel over canal systems. You know, the first in the Western Hemisphere, and it was done by an Indian tribe, by the Gila River Indian community. And so we continue to not. And this was taught by my elders, by my late father, is that you don't sit on your hands when it has to do with tribal sovereignty. Tribal sovereignty in itself is a verb. It's an action word. And so we're always looking for ways to address situations such as the drought, looking at innovative ways, whether it's solar panels over canals, whether it's manage aquifer recharge systems, where we're storing water and protecting our groundwater, whether it has to do with water conservation pipelines as well. That's one of the things that we, as agriculturalists, as farmers, going back to our traditional tie for the Hugam, is that, we have to be self-reliant. That's in our blood, that's in our DNA. And that's what, and we carry that to the actions and the approaches that we, as a Gila River Indian community, those decisions that we make, our 17-member council, our lieutenant governor, and all of our tribal members back on the Gila River Indian community. But I think what I want to do is, because an amazing history, you got a master class just now, from two tribal leaders about their history and their culture and traditions having to do with water in the Colorado River. I think what I want to do is I want to drill down on exactly what is the state of play now that is going on among a lack of an upper lower basin, a basin agreement, and what is that affecting right now in regards to, I see our Bureau of Reclamation representatives as well. How is that affecting the state of play with the federal government as well? And of course, the Gila River Indian community, we never pull punches. So what we'll do is, I think a simple critical point that I want to make is that the Gila River Indian community is the single water user most at risk in the Colorado River Basin. That's why we are really, pushing a lot of the issues that we see that not only affect us, not only affect, of course, the tribes, the 30 tribes in the basin, but affect all of the states as well. The long-term ramifications as well, that'll affect all of us. Because as we know, right, water connects us all. So it's a practical reality that we've, as a community and all of us, have confronted every single year since the lower basin states and the United States unveiled the drought contingency plan, right, in the late 2015. The upper basin talks about hydraulic shortage. You hear a lot about that. That's our reality as well. And we not only face major Colorado River shortages, but we also face constant shortages on the Gila River itself, affecting a significant portion of our water rights, our hard fought for water rights. And in the Gila River, we have only one storage facility, and that's the San Carlos Lake. And that's empty as of today. So to add to that, our Colorado River supplies were reduced by 82,000 acre feet this year, exacerbating their already dire situation. And with the expiration of those guidelines, we're now facing even larger cuts to our Colorado River entitlement. So when we talk about shortage, instability, and risk in the basin, no one is living with those realities more directly or more intensely right now in real time than the Gila River Indian community. And being the most exposed, having the most to lose, we couldn't stand on the sidelines wait to be called upon. And so we've done just the opposite. The community has been, I'll say, the most aggressive advocate for a basin-wide agreement. We've engaged with almost every basin state, most, if not all, of our 30 basin tribes, the vast majority of major water users, NGOs, and the United States in an effort to resolve the key points of disagreement and find those creative, innovative solutions to what at first may seem to be unsolvable problems. And as one of the basin's largest water users, to clearly set forth what we can live with and what our third rails are. But at the same time, we've worked to find ways to resolve those differences. And I can't say that all parties in the basin share the same commitment. And I'm very aware that there are those that have less at risk than the community who are standing on the sidelines, offering little other than to demand more from those that are already giving much already. But then also there are those others in similar circumstances who could stand on the sidelines, but have instead decided to do more to work toward a common goal of a more stable system. And thank you. And achieving a basin-wide agreement requires a shared strategy, a shared commitment, and a willing by all parties to confront hard truths together. I think that is a common sentiment among the panel here. But unfortunately, not enough of us were willing to meet that moment, that historic moment. As a result, a basin-wide agreement, of course, didn't happen. But when that path closed, the community, we didn't walk away. Instead, we became a strong component of a lower basin proposal. And we helped lead that effort in Arizona. And I'm proud of that, of the work that we've done. The lower basin proposal is, at its core, an agreement on cuts and conservation strategies designed to minimize the risk of even larger cuts in the foreseeable future. And I want to thank Tom Bushosky from the Arizona Department of Water Resources, who has been open and has been a tremendous and respectful partner in that as well. Tom and his staff, and I want to give them much respect as well. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. But on the flip side, what we have is not perfect, but it is the best, I think, that can be done in this current period of crisis, right? It's a practical, near-term approach where the lower basin states are willing to accept real pain in the form of 2.5 million acre-feet of cuts over the next 2 years, and also conserve at least 700,000 acre-feet of water to further protect the system. And importantly, to the community and the other affected tribes that rely on CAP water, this proposal contains resources to offset impacts to tribal water rights that Congress has designated as a federal trust resource. That goes to the essence of tribal sovereignty. This is critically important to the community, especially since we've already absorbed major cuts to our water supplies already. But today, unfortunately, it's far from clear whether the lower basin's collective efforts will bear fruit. Now, we're extremely concerned about the 10-year framework being proposed in the preliminary preferred alternative that I think you all know. The limited details that we've seen in the preliminary preferred alternative to the community are very troubling. What we've seen from the federal government is a proposed 10-year framework for operations, even though there is only a 2-year conservation agreement and at most 2 years of funding to support it to begin with. That mismatch is not a technical detail. Rather, it's the central problem that we're facing right now. A 10-year federal framework could impose massive additional cuts on the lower basin, on the state of Arizona, and therefore on my community beyond these first 2 years. That's why we're concerned. And it could do so with no strategy, much less any agreement, to offset the resulting damage to our Indian Trust assets. And we're also deeply concerned about how the federal framework would modify the law of the river. As proposed, it focuses on protecting elevation at Lake Powell rather than maintaining a minimum objective release of 8.23 million acre-feet. And that is not a minor operational difference or preference for the community. It effectively amends the long-range operating criteria without initiating the current legal and administrative process for amending those criteria. So if we're going to change the rules that govern this river, then we need to be honest about what's happening and what's being proposed before us. We need to follow the law. We need to follow the required process. And we need to recognize that operational choices dressed up as technical adjustments can have enormous consequences for water users, for states, for tribes, and for the long-term legitimacy of the entire framework. On top of all of this, uncertainty The community remains strongly concerned about whether the federal government is committed to adequately minimizing impacts to Indian trust assets. Our water rights are expressly codified as trust assets. That means the federal trust responsibility is not abstract and it's not optional. It applies here directly and unmistakably. I say all this to raise our concerns with what is being proposed in the preliminary preferred alternative. So I raise these concerns because time is short, and the sooner we engage in frank dialogue with the United States, our federal partner, the better. The community will continue to work through these issues with the department. We're engaging seriously and in good faith, but I really have to be candid to all of you at this point. It's still unclear whether this administration is willing to honor that trust responsibility over the next 2 years, much less over a 10-year horizon. And this is especially troubling because the community has consistently been one of the federal government's strongest partners in helping to finalize those durable agreements on the Colorado River. Now, over multiple administrations, including the first Trump administration, we've stepped up when it's mattered the most. We've stepped up during numerous crises. We were there for the drought contingency plan. We were there again for the 500+ plan. And we were there again during implementation of the supplemental environmental impact statement. Time and again, the community answered the call, as other tribes did. And we did not do that merely to protect our own rights. We did it because we are committed to sustaining the system itself. As Chairwoman Flores talked about the river as a living being, that's important. That's so important, you know, that important significance does not get lost in all of the politics that's going on right now in the upper basin and lower basin, and you know the concerns that we have about trust resources and about the federal trust responsibility that this federal administration has to tribes right now. We can't lose sight of those sacred teachings that I'm so proud that the Colorado River Indian tribes are championing and bringing to the forefront right now. But all of this, right, really, all of this, we understand that the future of this basin depends on more than legal entitlements. It depends on leadership, compromise, investment, and the willingness to act before a crisis becomes a collapse, a total collapse on the river. But partnership requires reciprocity. We all know that. It requires a federal government that is willing to engage seriously, to honor its obligations, to work towards solutions that are lawful, practical, and equitable. And if we no longer have that kind of partner, if we no longer have, because I have to go back to a graduation ceremony later tonight, and we usually have a dance. And so I guess within this vein, if we no longer have a real dance partner in our federal partners in this process, then the community, as was said earlier by you know, our past tribal leaders, will not hesitate to fight. We'll not hesitate to fight for our rights. We'll not hesitate to turn to the courts to protect our interests and our future. So let me be clear. Litigation is not our first choice, although I am surrounded by by an amazing legal team. But be that as it may, litigation is not our first choice. And it's never been our first choice. But our first choice, rather, is always a durable agreement that protects the system while respecting the rights and realities of those who depend on it. But the community will not stand by while its trust assets are placed at risk without protection and respect. So my message today is straightforward. The community has carried more than its share of risk. The community has shown more than its share of leadership. The community has repeatedly chosen cooperation over confrontation. But cooperation only makes sense if there's mutual respect. If the federal government wants a partnership, a respectful partnership, then it must adopt a post-2026 framework that matches real-world commitments, respects governing law, and fulfills its trust obligations to tribal nations. This is what fairness requires. This is what the law requires, and this is what the future of the basin requires. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all three of you. Really appreciate your words. We are running a little bit short on time in the panel. We have about 15 minutes left, and so my inclination is to hand over to Celine and Jason, who I believe will be coordinating the Slido questions to pose to our panelists.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. Looks like we may have a question down front from Chair.
Yeah, Chairman Levis, did you want to speak for a moment? We also have Chemehuevi Tribal Chairman.
Mike, let's go here. Here we go. Here we go.
I don't know.
Hello, my name is Daniel Levis. I'm the chairman of the Chemehuevi Indian Tribe. And I want to thank Chairman Flores and the other chairmans. We're talking about the water, right? The water is as a personhood, as a being, as a spirit, right? I'm just going to go a little bit outside of the box here and just, it's about tribal perspectives, right? So I want to add, lift the conscience, raise the conscience of the people of this room right now as far as a Nuwu perspective. Nuwu means the people. And so the Chemehuevi people have a deity known as Hutzipamaputz, and that is the ocean woman. Ocean woman is she's the land and the animals on the land, the wolves, wolf, shanav, the coyote, and the Tukubumans, the mountain lion. And so with those avatars' identities, she's also body loose. She's also the larva, and she's also the woman beside the ocean, weaving the basket, right? And so the other aspect of Ocean Woman, who Ocean Woman is, as Hutzipamaputz, is the goddess of all water in the oceans, from the silts up to the land, and in that the every living thing on this earth has that spirit, has that great Holy Spirit, so to speak, And so how is that? Everything that drinks, everything that breathes has that spirit, burning within our hearts, right? It's the sacred breath of creation that stokes the fire within us, that gives us presence, and that gives us connection to the elementals in the earth, that commune with the Creator all the way to the universe, to the Milky Way. Now that connection is represented through the cycles, right? The cycles of creation that lives within all of us. It is the construct of our DNA. It is the construct of that twist, of that spiral of those 4 oxygen molecules surrounded by the iron, connected to the base of the coating, right? But it's all embodied connected by this catalyst known as salt, a sump, what we call it Nuwu. That a sump is the catalyst of all creation, of all things that breathe, all things that drink. And what is that? What is that? The grass, it's the animals, it's you, it's I, that sacred breath stokes the fire within us, as a living light. Something you can't see, that's outside of our sight of vision within this 3D reality. Now, to understand that in a sense of self, as reflective of the interwovenness of this great basket from the spiral of creation from the beginning of time to where we are now, is represented in all things through an understanding and a connection through water, through the living breath, sacred breath of creation as in the air. That's water. It flows. Smoke shows how water flows, in its other elemental state of liquid. When that evaporates, goes to the sky, the hot and cold come together, and it goes down to snow, back to the mountain in the wintertime. Now, Nuwu, we believe in our salt song, in our stories about life and death, the 2 sisters. When in the winter times of our lives, when we pass, we go, we're not here no more. And it comes back as snow on the mountain. And the time comes back in spring as life. That connection is ancient, thousands and thousands of years that we believe, ever since all the way times of creation story, where all these stories tell how this land was formed, tells how all these things came into being before we were human, when we were animals, when we learned from them. They gave us everything. And so to understand the essence of life, water is life, you know, it's about perspective. It's about conscious. It's about presence. It's about creation. We are all creators through our conscious endeavor in this elemental experience. Now, we are talking about this elemental of water as life, and yeah, water is life, but we're talking about a representation as far as laws and rules and stuff as an elemental product, right? Now, when our worldview is not of that origin as far as this material representation of something imaginary that we must pay to receive. Our worldview as Nuwu is opposite of that. This is not a material, monetary representation. It is a spiritual representation. That spiritual representation is in everything we do and the purpose which we go forth. You know, we don't take too much. We never overtake. We leave some for everybody else. We give back. And sometimes when we got nothing, we give of self. You know, we give prayer, we give song. You know, the Nuwu of old were known as rain callers. And there's a lot of that has been disconnected from our conscious as us having that ability as humans to do that, to accomplish that, to connect in that way. But I'm here as a testament as to my lineage, as far as the descendants of my father, Matthew Levis Sr., his mother, Kankiwa, Hillside, her father, Chief Siwandip, Henry Hanks, and his father, Chief Pankoyer, signer of the Five Tribes Peace Treaty. And with that, the crit representation that I'm standing here today speaking on behalf of my mother, Iris Burns Levis, her mother, Gertrude Burns Eddy, and her mother, Pearl Smith Eddy, descendant of a Parawan, of a dreamer, of a seer, and Kaganapa, you know, a place below Lake Havasu, Suab Atsi, you know, where they had to move the gray, the red clay from their feet. That's what gives that name, that title, because of all the spillover that happened in Lake Havasu before the building of Parker Dam, where our people were removed. And we were able to come back in 1970 and be federally recognized. After thousands and thousands of years of that cycle and engaging that cycle, calling the rain. That's one of the disconnects that don't exist out there now. Do we know that we have that ability, that duty to pray, to give? All we're talking about is receiving. That cycle is broken. So we got to give more. And when we understand things more as a sacred breath of creation, as this living fire within us, then we can see that in all things that we're connected to, in relation to. Because we're all connected. We're all a big basket, part of this big basket of creation. Spiral of creation flows within us, within this four chambers of our heart. That spiral of creation is reflective of the universe, the Milky Way. The heart of creation is within us. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today to use up all the time and finish off.
Thank you, Chairman. That was not actually choreographed to try to limit the question period. But Jason, we got about 5 minutes, it looks like.
We got time for one. So in setting the stage for it, I want to acknowledge the questions that have been posed in the queue. There's some fascinating questions about the Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act, about the post-2026 process and tribal leaders' perspectives on that, and about tribal leaders' perspectives on their respective visions for water and water management on the reservations. I've keyed all those up. I have them written down. But the question that dovetails best with what the chair has just shared, in my view, is this one. It's for the panel. So it's a question about visions and indigenous knowledge. What is your vision, or what are your respective visions of future human relations with the Colorado River and around the Colorado River, including challenges that you've experienced in trying to share those visions and that indigenous knowledge with mainstream U.S. society, as well as trying to inspire and empower Native youth to carry those visions forward?
In 5 minutes, please. That's a hell of a question.
I'll go first. And that vision for the tribes is that to protect our river. That is our vision. That is our, what in tribal council we make motions, we do resolutions. So by Creator, Mativi, making us stewards of the land, that is our priority, our vision, is to save this water and keep the river flowing for future, like we said, for future generations. And what CRIT has done, and the tribal leaders of our council, sorry I'm pointing, but is that we enacted and got past our CRIT Water Resiliency Act. We did our water code, and we did of the lower basin is to proclaim and to acknowledge that the river is living. So I think that is our priority and our vision, and we will continue working, we will continue fighting, we will continue putting our visions into reality and into actions. Like Governor Lewis said, reality, what is now? Thank you. Thank you for the question, whoever asked that.
Chairman, Governor.
For the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, the vision for the tribe is to have that maximization to build upon what previous councils, previous leaders had envisioned for the usage of their advocation for the purpose of sustainability, for the sustainability of our economic development as well, and to set the future for generations to come, that these elements that we utilize, that we pray about, that we discuss, is going to bring something for more generations to come, utilizing the rivers that were once flowing and sharing rivers to sustain each and everyone's life. Give us that ability to have that development that prevents us from being that player in what is called the American dream, what is called sustainability utilizing. You've taken much more than what we've wanted from the river. Never ever have you given back to the indigenous people of this country. We think of you guys. We think of the non-Indian people in our prayers, in our ways. But not once do we get anything in return to help us sustain our economy, to sustain our livelihood and our reservation that's so plagued with many different issues. If we were to utilize in our visions to move our people in the direction that society would like us to move to have the understanding of the importance, life would be different. And we work towards that as a tribal council, as a tribe. So the envision for our people is twofold, from the young generation to the elders of our people, and in between, the sustainability of our economic development, utilizing the waters that are available to us, that at some point are not available through legislative action, through policies that don't allow us to utilize these waters the way we would like to use them to benefit our surrounding communities, to help one another, to share that commonality. Why isn't it giving that back to us? For all the water settlements that the tribes go into, it has a component of communities that are attached to it. And all those components that are attached to the tribal water rights settlements really diminish the tribe's ability to sustain its livelihood for the betterment of that nation or that tribe in all 574 tribal nations. Give us that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Governor.
Again, it's hard to follow these two tribal leaders here, so I'm kind of grasping as to what to say. But I think what we call ourselves the Akimra O'odham, the people of the river, and O'odham, as I was brought up, it's about honoring connections to your relatives, honoring connections to what we call our O'odham Juvad, our land, honoring connections, to our relatives. Those that have gone before us, our hugam, and honoring our water as a blessing. And so it's maintaining those connections, working towards that. And I think when we keep that historic connection to our hugam, the hugam civilization, keeping that connection there of agriculturalists, of farmers, of water protectors, and how to keep those traditions, what we call our O'odham Himmaduk, which is our way of life. How do we keep those in a very modern context? I think that's the challenge for us. And that's why we look at ways where we can be innovative, because we've always been innovative. Thousands of years ago, we were innovative. We built, canals systems that the modern day metropolitan Phoenix has utilized and has built upon. Those are the most, sophisticated canal systems that were built, on a par in the Nile Valley. Right? And I tell our children that's in your DNA, that's in your blood. Make those decisions, honor and never dishonor, that DNA that our Creator had given you, those gifts. And so when we look at ways, like when we talk about with Dave DeJong, when we're pioneering water conservation projects and solar panels over canals, whether it's 1,000 years later, that type of innovative thinking, that type of indigenous knowledge, it's still alive in what we're doing. And it's how to keep that framework of indigenous decision making and planning ahead and working together and respecting. Going back, respecting, your connections. Because when you stop respecting, you stop, honoring those connections. That's when you start to. That's when you start to not become who you are as O'odham, as a people. The people. That's what it means in essence. We have our own. We have our own names for that. We're still dealing with generational trauma as well, real trauma, right? When our Gila River, our Kutiakama, we call it Old Man River, the Kutiakama, when that water was diverted upstream by those early settlers in Arizona Territory, in the Upper Valley, our water, there's no other way to say it. Our water was stolen from us, and that pushed us. This was like right after the Civil War, over 175 years ago, that pushed us to the brink of extinction. We were scheduled as one of the tribes in Arizona to be moved to Indian Territory at the time, which was Oklahoma. We were just not that far from that. But, you know, we worked together, we fought, you know, we survived, and it wasn't for you know, for a lack of, like I said, of loss. You know, we were, because of, and this was within our water settlement, within the attendant court cases that were building toward our water settlement. You know, this is the first time that we made a connection to when our water was stolen from us, was taken from us. You know, that created an immune deficiency in us, which is now termed from the late 1890s to the early 1900s, what is type 2 diabetes now, right? So we had one of the highest incidences of type 2 diabetes, not only in the United States, but in the world. And so it's still almost epidemic proportions that we're dealing with now. And it's that generational trauma that we are still trying to heal ourselves from. You know, we're fighting for our water rights, whether it's on the Gila River, and we were forced to take in lieu of water supply from the Colorado River as well to make us quote unquote whole. But this was something that was in our water settlement. And so we're fighting, as all of the tribes in the basin are, though our 29 other tribal nation relatives, you know, we're fighting for that water to make sure that we have a livable, sustainable, verdant future ahead of us, you know, so that we can, you know, look at ways where we can bring back, and we are in a small part bringing back agricultural, farm to table, access and opportunities for fresh produce. You know, we have, and if you Google her, we have a community member, Ramona Farms, single-handedly, she brought back all of our traditional plants and seeds, tepary beans, our traditional wheat, you know, our traditional corn. One of my the jewelers made this, and this represents corn. You know, as well as our protection stone, the turquoise as well. So water is life, and this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the survival and for our lifeways and our traditions and our ongoing connection to our Hogum, just like all the other tribes along the basin and across the United States and the indigenous people across the world are dealing with right now.
Thank you, Governor. And I just want to thank our panel very much. Really appreciate this. I think that one of the things this underscores is that people want to know what is important to tribes, what tribes are thinking, what tribes care about. Do not talk to people about tribes. Talk to tribes, to tribal leaders, to tribal staff, to tribal representatives. They are more than capable of speaking for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Very much.